store. In the meantime, a jury has just been seated in the insulin overdose murder trial of Sarah Hartsfield in Chambers County. Now, Hartsfield is the retired military wife and mother of 4, accused of killing her 5th husband back in 2023. KPRC2 reporter Bryce Newberry joining us live from Chambers County. Now, Bryce, the jury selection took longer than expected today.
Yeah, it did take a lot longer than expected, but here just in the last hour or so, 12 jurors have been seated. 2 alternates are also on the panel, so they were sent home after a very long and grueling day of jury selection here. Prosecutors were asking questions to the prospective jurors about living or dealing with someone who has diabetes, and she also sought some juror perspective on how they would handle a murder case that may not have DNA evidence or surveillance camera evidence or even an obvious crime scene, kind of painting a picture of what we could expect to see as this trial progresses over the next up to 3 weeks or so. We did get some new video here just in the last 30 minutes or so. This is Sarah Hartsfield leaving the courthouse. She had been sitting through that jury selection process all day. She wore heels, a tan blazer, and slacks, and she stayed pretty quiet during all of this process, but she did sometimes lean over and talk briefly with her attorneys, appearing to make eye contact, really deliberately looking at some of the prospective jurors out throughout the courtroom. We did see several key witnesses who arrived here at the courthouse today as well. They expected that they may have had to take the stand. That included the victim's family. Joseph Hartsfield's family was here, her ex-husbands we saw, and also her children were out here. And that was to discuss alleged bad acts or crimes from the past that prosecutors are hoping to bring up during this murder trial. They're called extraneous offenses, but the hearing about bringing those up did not end up happening because jury selection just took so long, and right now we don't really have a clear picture of when that may or may not happen. We did not get to have a camera inside the courtroom for this process today, but we did see 100 Chambers County residents show up here to take part in this voir dire process, and both sides emphasized that anyone that may serve on this jury would have to set aside their biases, kind of check those at the door so that they could come in and fairly and impartially be on this jury, so that they would not, bring in any of the things that they may have seen on TV or read online about this case. But during the lunch break, we did hear from the sheriff. He had some pretty strong words right out here in front of the courthouse.
She's not that kind, sleepy little person that she makes herself out to be. You can just look at her overall history and you can tell that there's a very evil side to her.
And the sheriff added that he is glad that other places have reopened investigations involving Sarah Hartsfield and some of the past alleged crimes, again, that she has never been convicted of. Tomorrow morning, we are expecting opening statements to get underway here in Anahuac. And again, we don't yet know about when those extraneous offenses may be introduced. It may kind of be throughout the process of this trial. We will have to wait and see. But of course, we'll keep everyone updated every step of the way.
A very big day out there. Bryce Newberry reporting live for us in Chambers County. Bryce, thank you for walking us through that process. Now, by the way, Bryce is the only reporter in the courtroom for jury selection, and he'll be providing regular updates on YouTube all throughout the trial. So be sure to subscribe to the KPRC2 YouTube channel to stay on top of it all. Our investigators are often poring over records, including pay records of public officials. And it was during one such search that we came across a Houston police officer who made a lot of money last year. Turns out it was back pay, a lot of it. And we wanted to know why that officer made even more than the chief of police. And as 2 investigators Joel Eisenbaum discovered, there's a big story behind that big payment.
The story of Houston police officer Lucas Vieira first caught our eye because of just how much money the city paid him last year. Nearly $250,000, which we found kind of interesting since the city had fired him just a couple years earlier.
Shoot it! Because there's a clear video of him instructing another officer to shoot a person in the back who's handcuffed and running away.
Shoot it! Bah! Bah! It is the summer of 2019, and this is an HPD traffic stop that's gone haywire. 33-year-old Andre Howard, the driver, pulled over for an expired registration. He's trying to escape on foot, but he's not going to get far.
Mother. All right, bro, you got it.
And then when he caught the individual in handcuffs, then he hit him on the head 3 times with handcuffs.
The HPD officer seen making the arrest in this video is Officer Lucas Vieira. And for 2 years, Vieira stayed on the job without any fallout. Why?
The first review of the incident, they say he was completely justified in what took place.
But somewhere along the way,
someone saw the video, did not like it, therefore they opened the investigation up and went through it again.
But that delayed review presented a sizable problem with the criminal case against Officer Vieira.
Well, the district attorney's office actually was either 1 or 2 days late under the law in filing the charges.
The 2-year statute of limitations had expired. The aggravated assault by a public servant case against Lucas Vieira, a felony, was then dismissed. There would be no criminal trial. The DA's office declined our interview request to talk about the filing misstep, citing the case was handled during a previous administration.
And he's back on the job.
He's back on the job with a big bonus check.
That's right. Lucas Vieira got his job back with HPD, a technicality. His firing had come too far after the original incident. The city had made a mistake by not taking disciplinary action within 180 days of the incident. State law for a protected public servant.
You violated state law, therefore he gets his job back.
And that's what happened.
And that's what happened.
And it happened with back pay. Last year, Vieira was among the very highest paid HPD officers, earning almost $250,000, $40,000 more than former police chief Troy Finner.
He's doing a great job. He does, he works hard. He comes to work. He's not bitter about being terminated or anything like that. He comes to work every day, and he has been trying to make the city of Houston safer with the project that he's working on.
But not everyone is buying into that point of view. Civil rights groups, including LULAC, don't want Officer Vieira back on the job.
I wasn't aware of this, and I thank you for bringing it to our attention. But it's something that I will bring, to the other officers and see how we can address it.
Mayor Whitmire declined our request to talk about Officer Vieira's reinstatement. We also asked the city how often officers in general get reinstated and why. So far, the city hasn't come up with any information on that end, but we're And thanks for waiting for us here on Facebook Live. Just had to switch over YouTube Live. We had to switch over some of the technical things here so that we could continue doing this from the newscast onto YouTube. It was a really long day here in the Chambers County Courthouse. Jury selection for the Sarah Hartsfield murder trial. Again, she has been in jail since February of 2023, indicted for the murder of her 5th husband who died due to complications of toxic effects of insulin. We do have Rick DeToto. He is a defense attorney and our legal analyst for this case. He's in studio, as I understand it. Hi, Rick.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for being here just to kind of talk with us and go through everything that kind of happened today, because there was a lot. And I think, I mentioned during the live shot on KPRC that, there were a lot of witnesses who showed up here, and they were expecting that they were possibly going to have to take the stand and testify about some of these bad acts, alleged crimes from the past that prosecutors wanted to bring up. That never happened because we ended up doing jury selection all day. From your experience, was that kind of to be expected, or what do you think about the timeline here that they had initially indicated
Well,
for going through all of this?
I think the timeline was a little ambitious. Picking a jury in a high-profile case such as this usually takes 2 or 3 days. The other thing, from a lawyer's perspective, I think that the lawyers need to know what they're going to put in their opening statements. So you talked about the extraneous offense, and we can talk about that later, why I think they're trying to get it in this case. but they need to know what's going to be part of their opening statements in terms of, is the prosecution going to talk about it, and is the defense going to talk about it as well? So it's interesting that they haven't figured that out yet. Maybe there's some agreement that we don't know about, but I would suspect that the defense would aggressively fight those extraneous offenses coming in this case.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe that might come up tomorrow in the afternoon. There's kind of some mixed things that I've heard about when these extraneous offenses may end up actually coming up. So we'll talk more about that in just a bit. But I wanted to also ask you kind of about some of the questions that we heard during this voir dire process. So we wanted to show our viewers at home just the people who are kind of the leads on this case. So we have the lead prosecutor, Mallory Vargas, who spent a lot of time questioning the prospective jurors today. We also heard from the defense attorney, Case Darwin. And so you can see, we'll keep these graphics up just so you can see kind of some background on the folks that we're talking about here. But one question, that came up during the voir dire process today was about diabetes and crime shows. And so first of all, when I told you, Rick, earlier about that question about diabetes that both sides asked about, you said that was interesting. Just why do you think that's interesting? What's your take on that?
So in most murder cases, there's some act that caused the murder. For example, you shot the person with a gun, or you stabbed them with a knife, or you ran them over with a car. In this case, it sounds like the prosecution is trying to say that the way the person committed murder was by not acting. So I think the jurors have to find out about diabetes. They need to know what happens when someone's in shock or diabetic shock and how insulin works within the medical part of the case. So they're going to try to prove, I think, in my opinion, that she had a duty to act and she didn't act. And as a result, it caused the murder of this person.
We talked a lot about crime shows in there as well today. I mean, I didn't, but I heard them talking about it. And I'm curious, in this day and age when there are so many crime shows, so many, true crime social media feeds that people can look at, how does that really make their job so much harder, especially in a case like this where we don't have a lot of that evidence like the DNA or the surveillance video, so it seems?
Yeah, well, I think you have to make a distinction between true crime and the fictional crime shows. In the fictional crime shows, they're always wrapped up in a neat little bow. There's DNA or there's surveillance or there's a satellite overhead that saw the person running from the scene and the car they got into and the license plate, and their DNA is on the door handle and they get arrested. Well, that's not how crimes work, and that's not how investigations work. Now, the true crime documentaries are a little bit better. They show the nuts and bolts of the inside of the investigation and what the investigators have to do, how the prosecution prepares for the case, and how the defense prepares for this case. But it's all about expectations. What do the jurors expect the evidence to be? And we have to make sure that it's not, the satellite DNA and fingerprints on the door and stuff like that. So we have to find out what they think is going to happen in the case and bring their expectations down, especially when there's no, the normal evidence in this case, DNA, blood, gunshot residue, video surveillance, stuff like that. So we got to temper their expectations to get them ready to accept the evidence that's coming.
The prosecutor also spent some time talking about this theory of like beyond reasonable doubt versus beyond all doubt. And at one point they put a picture up of a puzzle, and you could see that some of the pieces were missing, and it was like a world globe. And she was making the point that, jurors could reasonably get to the point of knowing that that was a world map, but, they didn't have all the pieces there. Do you think that juries these days kind of expect all of those things and they want kind of beyond all reasonable doubt, or beyond all doubt when they get in there and start hearing everything?
I don't know about beyond all doubt, but I think they do expect what they see on TV. They expect all that type of physical evidence, the scientific evidence, and the expert to come in and tie everything together so they know what happened. And again, that's not how cases happen. I love that diagram, except in Harris County and a lot of the counties I go to, they use a gun. And it's a jigsaw puzzle of a gun, and they take some pieces out and they ask the jurors, hey, juror number 3, what is that? Well, it's a gun, okay? It's obvious a gun, yes. But when I get the chance to ask some questions, I say, what kind of gun is it? Is it a prop gun? Is it a movie gun? Is it capable of firing a bullet? Is it a BB gun? Is it a paintball gun? So you get the chance to get into the juror's mind and make them understand that it's not just what they think it is, it's what the evidence shows. So it's a complicated process picking a jury, and you have to kind of make sure that their expectations are low in terms of what the evidence might be and what they expect.
It was 8 men and 4 women that got selected for this jury, and then the 2 alternates, there's a man and a woman. So we'll see, obviously, how it ends up going. One other thing that I want to ask you here, because the medical examiner in this case has determined the victim died due to complications of toxic effects of insulin. But the manner of death here was left undetermined. And when you look at the indictment, when she was indicted back in February of 2023, it just says that he was killed by a manner and means unknown to the grand jury. And so how much more difficult does that make it for the state proving beyond a reasonable doubt the burden here?
I think it's extremely difficult, and I think the jurors are going to not understand what that means. You know, there's no method for the person being killed. So I think that the prosecution is going to have to rely on, she was a caretaker and she had a duty to act. And that's why they want to get all these extraneous offenses in to show, look, not only did she do it this time, she might have done it before, and it kind of lines up into her character and what happened. That's why, in my opinion, again, the court has to be very careful in what extraneous offenses they let in to not violate her right to a fair trial, to due process and the rights guaranteed to us by the Constitution. So I think they have a tough case, but if they get those extraneouses into evidence, it's going to make it a little bit easier.
And just to be clear with these extraneous offenses, what exactly is the judge kind of considering when thinking about whether or not to let those in? And just for people who might not know, some of these offenses that we're talking about like the murder of her ex-fiance in Minnesota in 2018. She was initially cleared in that case, and it was ruled self-defense, but that got reopened. There was an alleged murder plot involving the new wife of one of her ex-husbands, and then there's also alleged child abuse for years. So those are kind of some of the big things that prosecutors are hoping to bring up. But what does the judge really have to think about in whether or not to let those in? Oh, okay. Yeah, we just lost Rick's microphone for a minute there, but we will wait and try to get that back so that we can ask that last question. Yeah, we're seeing video right now. This is from the past when Sarah Hartsfield walked across the street from the Chambers County Jail and then here into the courthouse. You'll notice, of course, she's in a jail jumpsuit there with the orange and white stripes, but today and for the rest of this trial, she's expected to be brought here into the courthouse wearing regular street clothes and no sort of handcuffs. We saw her walking around pretty freely, getting up from her seat. So that's what we're expecting throughout this trial. And I do think that we do have Rick's microphone back now. So, Rick, I want to go back and ask you that question, if we can, about what the judge really has to consider in allowing those extraneous offenses to be brought in.
Yeah, generally in the guilt innocence phase of a trial, those prior crimes or bad acts are not admissible, and the court has to be very careful in letting them in so that it doesn't prejudice the defendant. Under certain circumstances, under a rule of evidence 404B, they can come in for example, for motive, opportunity, intent, or MO. So if they can somehow argue that those prior offenses fit into that exception in the rules of evidence, the judge may let them in. But I would tend to think that those prior acts are very prejudicial in this case, and they could lead to the jury form an opinion based on those alone and not the evidence in the case. So I would suspect that the judge won't let them in, but again, that's just my opinion. I think it's real dangerous in a case like this to let the jury hear those in guilt innocence.
I want to ask you one last thing here, because we're talking about these extraneous offenses that really brought a lot of the witnesses here to Chambers County. We're talking about some of them from different counties, different states, who have been subpoenaed to come and testify. And we should mention voluntarily, because that subpoena power doesn't apply out of state. But I want to just see, since they are here and since they've been asked to come and testify, I don't want to say that would maybe put pressure on the judge to let them testify or let those possible offenses be brought in, but what's your take on that? Because a lot of money went in and planning went into all of this.
Yeah, I don't know if a judge is going to feel pressure in terms of witnesses that have come from out of state. I don't think that would happen in this case, but I think that the judge has a duty to listen to the evidence if the state tells the court, hey, we're going to try to present this in guilt innocence. The defense is going to object, and then he has to listen to the witnesses testify and hear, number one, is it reliable? Does it make sense? Should I let this get to the jury? And mainly, does it fit under those exceptions to get it in under 404B?
Well, we will obviously have to wait and see what ends up happening. Rick, thank you so much for just joining us and kind of helping break down some of these big, harder to understand concepts. It's a big case here, one of the most unique, the sheriff said today, for Chambers County. So we will check in with you again throughout this trial as some of these big days progress here. But for now, that's all we have from Chambers County. From tomorrow morning, we'll check in again on KPRC2 Morning News and just discuss what we are expecting tomorrow morning with opening statements expected and then moving on into this trial, which again could last for up to 3 weeks.